making noise. There we go. Now we got that taken care of. Welcome, everybody. We are now streaming live. If you don't want to be recorded, feel free to mute or block your camera. We are streaming live on YouTube now. This is our outreach meeting this week, and we just came off of a heavy weekend of Backdrop Live, a lot of activity. So I will probably be talking a bit about that, but let's just start with our regular introductions. I am Tim Erickson, St. Paul Tim. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota. And in terms of just other miscellaneous stuff, I'm just recovering from Backdrop Live and trying to get caught up on my work. So Sarvashri.
I'm Sarvashri, I say it. And I am working on Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Backdrop because I'm pretty much a beginner, and figure if I can write something, I'll probably understand it enough to be successful with Backdrop and help other people in the same situation. I'm in North Carolina, a little town called Walnut Cove.
Nice. Jen?
I'm Jen Lampton, joining from cold and cloudy Oakland, California today. That's it. Jack.
Hi, y'all. I'm Jack. My pronouns are they and them. I'm here in Oakland, and I will probably be quiet because my partner is also in a meeting right now, so I'll be mostly quiet, and I might chime in through Zulip.
Okay. Muting myself doesn't help. Okay. So what we talked about right before the meeting was let's go through some of our regular agenda items quickly, and then maybe talk about Backdrop Live. And there was certainly discussion about outreach there. One of the things on our normal agenda, we talk about the various accounts with which we do outreach, and just an opportunity to check in on content for those things. I think we're actually in pretty good shape in terms of outreach activity. Certainly Backdrop Live forced that a bit in that we've gotten newsletters out in the last, we've had 3 newsletters in the last 2 months. Our blog has actually been fairly active. With some great contributions. Most recently, Peter gave us a nice post on what it's like to be a core committer. There were some other posts around Backdrop. Oh, and even more recently, the domain name announcement that was posted, I think, just yesterday. So our blog is plenty active right at the moment. However, that doesn't mean we want to let our guard down. It'd be nice to keep. I think our goal has been in the past, to try and get something weekly. And so we should be thinking about next week. Again, the newsletter, we've had a couple of newsletters go out. The next one would be scheduled for right at the end of the month. I think Peter was shooting for the last week of the month. The last one came out just at the beginning of this month. So right around there. Event stuff. This is a good reminder to me because I'm trying to do more regular virtual user groups, and we had a couple of them lined up, and they've all passed, and now I don't have anything on the agenda, but I do have some ideas and some people that are interested in doing things. So if anybody has other ideas for virtual user groups, let me know. The main one right now is that has been requested numerous times is something on writing tests for Backdrop. We'd also like, that's kind of an advanced topic, so I'm looking for a beginner topic to balance that out. The big thing is dashboard notifications right now. I could use some help on that. If we could take a minute and think about what we could be putting on the dashboard, because we've had virtual user groups and Backdrop Live to announce that kind of stuff. Right now, we've got some fairly old, the messages that are showing up are like the release of 1.18, which is pretty old news. And I put up a link to Peter's blog post, partly just because I needed something. But I don't know if that's the best use of that space.
I think one thing that would help new users is to post something about Softaculous, having a one button install of Backdrop.
Sure. I don't know if we ever put that on the dashboard, but just sort of announcing that the current users who are going to see that may not need it, but if they're aware of it, they can tell other people. And I can't see that would hurt.
Can you get Backdrop directly from Softaculous, or do you have to get it through a service that uses Softaculous? Do you know?
Well, I think you have to, I think for ongoing use, you have to get it through a service that uses it. But I didn't realize this, but Gregory has promoted it, is that they do have a demo thing just like ours. So, and I think Gregory added that to our page. So you can now just go to Softaculous and spin up a temporary site and test out Backdrop.
Okay.
And
So in terms of things that go on the dashboard, what I think will be best is something that is actually useful to the person who's reading it. And I feel like just saying like Softaculous has support for Backdrop doesn't really do any good, because they aren't going to know what Softaculous is and they aren't going to know why they should care.
Sure.
But if we have like try a demo or something that goes to the Softaculous website and they can actually do something with it, then that's good. Or if, I don't know, you're running Backdrop on a demo site, like somewhere on one of our sandboxes, and it said like get hosting for Backdrop, and we actually sent them to a place where they don't need to know what Softaculous is, but it gives them the answer to that question: how do I host my Backdrop site? That would also be useful, but that would also be tricky because I don't know how you would choose like which host you would promote via that feature. But yeah, just
well, we could get the various host. If people are not using a host that has Softaculous or doesn't have a one-click install of Backdrop, all of them usually have one-click install of WordPress and other CMSs and so forth. And oftentimes that's through Backdrop. I mean, that's through Softaculous, like this, where I'm hosting, they have Softaculous, and I didn't try installing there, but I did write to Softaculous and ask them to put in Backdrop, and somebody else did, and I guess a few people have, so they did it apparently. Yeah. So now I would be able to install Backdrop on my host and do development there, and that would save a lot of trouble for beginners, for new users. And that's one thing that makes WordPress sort of attractive. Oh, I just click this one button and I've got a WordPress site. If they can click one button and have a Backdrop site, then that's cool.
Yeah. So this is for the dashboard that shows up when you already have a Backdrop site, right? Exactly. So when you're logged into your own Backdrop site, you'll see it. Yeah, I mean, that kind of announcement sounds definitely good in term, like to make in general, in terms of the dashboard, maybe. I mean, it can't hurt that much to have it there. In general, I wonder, it'll be interesting to see who we're reaching with the dashboard. I know there's a or with the dashboard like news feed about Backdrop. There's one of those in Civic CRM, and it tends to either confuse users or we turn it off for most users because they're like, what is this stuff in my website? I don't know what this is. Where is it coming from? I wonder what we'll see with that for Backdrop installs that have the panel, like who will pay attention to it, who will use it, like whether it's mostly site builders, developers. It'll be interesting. I don't know if there's a way to get that understanding, because then we can also target the stuff that's put through it better, but I'm not sure, like we could put something in there like survey, like who are you if you are looking at this?
Well, wherever nonprofits are looking for something, or other people are looking for a CMS to work with to develop their site, through those organizations, even like Civic CRM, people are running into other people all the time who have a nonprofit or have some sort of site that they want to promote, or an interest, a user group, or something they want to be able to have a website for. This would be a really good alternative to WordPress, is to say, look at Backdrop, here's how you can do it. Just go to your provider. Your provider probably has Softaculous or has a one button install, and you can learn it there. You can actually put up the site that way And that saves the FTP and all that kind of difficulty for new users and beginners that don't know how to
Yep.
put all the ingredients of a CMS onto some host.
Sure.
That held me back for about 6 months one time. I didn't know how to do all FTP and how to transfer a database file and set up a database file and all that stuff was very messy. This makes it really attractive for people to look at Backdrop as an alternative for their
Sarvashri, I think
small business.
I think we will do something on the dashboard on Softaculous. So, but Jen, your points are absolutely right. We need to contextualize it, make it useful. I don't think it's the best kind of content, but to Jack's point, I agree. I would love to know if, and I've mentioned this several times, that we've had this out for like 1.5 years now, and I'm not getting any feedback that it's really that useful. Jen, I think you've mentioned that you've heard a few comments, but like I haven't had any, even anecdotal. So I mean, it would be nice to figure out some way to evaluate if it's even worth spending time on this. Are people using it at all? And I was in my head pondering, Jack, exactly what you said is, should we just put a note up saying, hey, are you reading this? If you are, let us know. But that seems tacky, but it might work. So I don't know if anybody has any ideas how to evaluate this. The thing is, it does require some work, and its effectiveness also is going to be diminished if we're not working on it right. If we don't have useful information there, people will learn to tune it out, and then it becomes pointless. So it's kind of like, do we want to continue making an effort to have content there if nobody's using it anyways? And if we don't have content there, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It will be useless.
One thing we could do to figure out where people are coming from is check like the links in there and check the referrers to see if we're getting a bunch of people coming from inside their own Backdrop sites or not. So we could tell if it's coming from like admin dashboard on those landing pages. So I think if we dug into the analytics reports on the destination of those links, we might be able to get a little bit more information on that.
Sure. I wonder if we posted a note saying the first 3 people to contact us get a free t-shirt, if anybody would. That would be a pretty good indication. Of course, if 3 people did right away, that they might have been the only 3. So that's
but at least they really want a t-shirt.
Right. Well, right. If nobody replied, that would be meaningful. If people did reply, less meaningful because we don't know how many. But well, unless 50 replied for t-shirts, that would, and we only had 3. Well, if anybody has, I mean, I suppose one thing we could do would be to sort of analytics wise, is Jen. I mean, there's probably multiple ways of doing it, and you had one, but one would be to create sort of an article or announcement that is sort of targeted at the dashboard, and then see if the word gets out or if anybody replies to that message.
Yeah. I was thinking that too. It might be good to just have a Backdrop on Softaculous blog post anyway that could sort of cover all of those bases of like, here's how you can use it and here's how you can demo it, and ask your hosting provider, like all of the kind of more information that we can't fit into a dashboard blurb, and then just send people there. So
right.
Yeah, afterthought on my part was like, oh yeah, we do this all the time.
Yes.
Tim does this all the time.
Kind of the direction I was thinking, although I hadn't fleshed it all out yet. So
also on analytics, what are people searching for when they're searching for a CMS for their small business or organization?
So Sarvashri, that's a great point, but we're still finishing the talk about the notifications. I'm still, if there's any other notifications that we should put up on the dashboard,
okay,
that would be good.
Come back.
We can come back to your point. Okay. Yeah. Is there? So I think the kinds of things to me that are most useful for the dashboard are things like Backdrop Live, virtual user groups, things that an existing user could participate in. Certainly announcements about upgrades, that's important.
The survey is something I think we should put on that list too, for after every minor release, getting a read on people who are already using Backdrop, what they think would be important features.
So I think the kinds of things to me that are Oh, there was a little echo there. Okay. Sounded like me, but I welcome Neil. We're talking just right now a little bit about our dashboard notifications on Backdrop. But is there any, so those are all the general topics of the kinds of things that would work well. We did put the survey on the dashboard, and if we do it again, I think we will definitely again. Is there anything like that going on that I'm missing right now? I guess not. I don't want to belabor this, but please, for a couple of weeks there, it's like we had a flurry of things to put on the dashboard, and it was really nice. And now I'm like in a bit of a lull. So I think social media wise, we've had also certainly on Twitter, plenty. Our Facebook feed had some activity during Backdrop Live, not as much as we'd like. If we have anybody that is able to and wants to help us with our keep an active Facebook presence, that would be great. I just don't use Facebook enough, and so I don't always think to cross post stuff. Everyone for Backdrop Live, I made a little bit of an effort, but really not enough. I don't know. I think in terms of skimming through the rest of our agenda, I don't know that there's anything that I expect it's urgent enough to worry about right now. I'd rather move on to either Backdrop Live or we could follow up on Sarvashri's point as well. Why don't we start with Backdrop Live, though, and just do a little bit of a debrief? I think our biggest decision, in my view, coming out of Backdrop Live is the next Backdrop Live. We have it tentatively scheduled. We got a little bit of feedback that, mid-July, which is when we tentatively have it. I think the tentative date we have is July 10th, if I recall. A little bit of feedback that might not be the best time, and I mean, for sure, I can hear. I'm sure there are arguments against it, but the question is, are they strong enough to change our plans, and/or what would the alternative be? So, any thoughts on that, or anything about Backdrop Live right now?
I thought it went very well.
Okay.
It was
well.
It was good. It was good enough,
Good. You've mentioned a few takeaways already, so that's this morning. So clearly, it was helpful to you. I thought it went pretty well.
Do you want to go ahead, Jack?
You go, and then I'll go.
Right. I was gonna say, I also thought it would go well. I think for the next one, the one thing that I would like to see us do better is get registration open sooner, because I think the reason that our turnout was lower is that we just didn't have as much time for people to plan for it. And so my preference would be to pick a date now and stick to it and say, even if you can't make the one in June, there's going to be one in the fall, and sort of let people plan around a date and start moving forward, like setting up the registration now and having it enable at X time. And we can even say now, registration will be open on X date, and just have a little bit more forethought now that we have a system that we can reuse. I think it'll be easier to do that going forward. So a little less crazy scamper. Oh my gosh, it's in a month, which is what we've done twice now. So yeah. Getting that going forward would be good.
It's a good idea, because once people put it on their calendar, then it's there and they won't do something to stomp on it.
Okay, Jack.
Yeah, so I was not around for the first Backdrop Live, and I think it's a very cool event. I wonder how often we should have it, because part of like how frequent it should be, basically. It seems like at the first one, there were like 60 or so registrants, or I think that's the number I saw. And then we got almost, it dropped down to half for the next one. I also saw the huge amount of labor it took, mostly from Tim, frankly, but I know from other folks too, like on the technical side for the event side and things like that. So, and yet, like in the last couple of weeks, we were still struggling to get sessions, like the slots filled in for presenters or discussions or things like that. So given all of that, like, I wonder just about how frequent the Backdrop Live event should be versus other more casual things that provide similar spaces. Like I think the user group can provide a space for people to like connect and discuss and things like that with a lot less labor that goes into it in like ahead of time. So was it planned to be like a quarterly thing or how frequent, like what's the schedule for Backdrop Live?
We did the first one just as a test, and in the debrief, as we were talking about it, it went really well, and we said, well, when do we want to do it next? And the idea that was thrown out was release on the release cycle, so 3 times a year. And this was obviously the first one following that. But that is the current working assumption. We scheduled 2 of them out. There were other things that was discussed about at this time about like should one of the 3 be combined with Bad Camp in some way or something. These were just ideas that weren't really fleshed out, but they were at least mentioned. I have other thoughts along that. Last year in the fall, the group in Philly did that open source CMS event. And I could see that they did online because of COVID. And I don't know if they plan to redo it as an open source CMS or if they plan to redo it virtually. But that would be a more, maybe even a better mesh or sort of collaboration with Backdrop Live than Bad Camp, because Bad Camp is a physical space and Backdrop Live isn't. So that's a hard, I mean, I'm open to that. But anyways, Jack, so the idea was 3 times a year. We're, I think, still figuring that out. But Jen, I think you were a strong proponent of that. Do you want to say a little bit about why you thought 3 times a year was good?
Yeah, I mean, so I thought the reason we had such a big turnout at the first one was because we had never done anything before, but we are still sort of figuring out how to do it. And I think the reason this scheduling was so hard this time is because people still thought they needed to have presentations. And I think that the more we do this, the more people will become familiar with the format, and it'll be like, oh, I just want to talk about something. I'll just put a topic in the list. And Tim and I, well, Tim mostly, is working on a sort of a self-scheduling feature that would allow people to do that themselves, so that it'll become less work on, you know, a sort of an administrative role going forward. And I think the combination of like people understanding how Backdrop Live works and people being able to self-schedule will mean that we won't have to prod people so hard to get content, and that they'll be able to schedule it themselves in the future. And hopefully having this one system that we can reuse every time will also mean less work from the technical side going forward. So I think in terms of the amount of burden on organizers, that's going to only decrease over time. And I think that having it 3 times a year was exciting for us because it overlapped with release cycle. So it was able to be like, okay, well, you know, January going to be focused on a release. We'll take February off. March, we're going to have focused on Backdrop Live, you know, April off, May focused on release. And that sort of gave us enough time to have that like enthusiasm arc where the Backdrop Live could fill in the sort of down spots between releases. So we wouldn't be trying to do everything all at once, and would sort of keep momentum up. I also really like 3 times a year because it allows people to say, I know I'm not going to be available in July. It's okay to miss that one. I'm going to attend in August. And it would sort of keep everybody available to participate, even if they're not, you know, available every time. Like it keeps the community meeting frequently, even if not everybody can be there for one date a year. You don't have to wait 2 years before you can be involved. And I was hoping that having a lower work event would make it easier for us to have it more often. And it would be sort of more of a casual thing than like a DrupalCon in-person thing. And if we ever decide to do a BackdropCon in-person thing, that would definitely only be once a year, but hopefully this will be easier for us to manage than that going forward. So more of a like community building casual thing than like a official normal tech conference thing. That was my general thinking.
Yeah, I want to make clear too that when this was planned, the intention was to keep it informal and to not have, you know, to not overdo it work-wise. And a lot of the work that I've been putting into it that people are seeing is me just getting enthusiastic and jumping out and doing things that people didn't necessarily ask me to do. So it isn't like the intention was for it to be so much work. On the other hand, I worry a little bit about if we didn't put that work into it. On the other, but I agree with Jen that it's getting easier. We had this time we sort of rebuilt a lot of things from the first time that we won't have to hopefully next. Well, we're still going to be putting a lot of work into it, but a lot of that work is not just on back. It's a sustainable thing. It's not like we'll probably have to do quite a bit of work on the website for the next event, but that work isn't just about that next event. It's about all of our events, because the tools we're building are just, will be used for virtual user groups and other things. So yeah. So
you got some hands up in the queue. I think Joseph
sure.
put his hand up a while ago, and then me.
Yeah. So kind of two things. I think probably one of the reasons that we had lower attendance this time was just because it was a lot closer to the event when we actually were able to announce things. So we had less build-up time. And then a suggestion, I think, if we had some way to let people say this is a discussion or this is a presentation, that might be a more explicit way of saying, hey, we're okay with just having discussions.
Yeah, we have that now.
Yeah. With the spreadsheet, that was a little hard.
Yeah,
a whole bunch of data.
It's built into the website. We just didn't have the self create a node part going this time, but it was intended to be a little bit clearer that when you register, you can upload your presentation right now, or you can have a discussion during the event. And we can definitely do more around that phrasing in the future, especially when we get to that page and you have to decide what kind of event you're going to do. But we just didn't turn that on this time.
Okay.
We know it's a problem.
And then just as a personal,
Joseph finish. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just as a personal thing, I really like these events, even if it's not an outreach thing that gets a lot of attention. If it's been a long time since I've had opportunities to just hang out and discuss things, I kind of get, I don't know, unmotivated, and these events kind of hype me up a bit. So I'm excited to work on things again.
Good.
So yeah. Jack.
Yeah, word. Thank you so much, y'all, for kind of explaining the origins and the feeling behind it. So I'm sold that okay, it seems 3 times a year, more casual thing. That seems good. I think that the things, Tim, all the work that you took upon yourself, I think was really necessary, and made the event much better than it, or it made it made the event, I feel like, so things like organizing a help desk, things like that, trying to get volunteers, etc. So, thank you for doing it. And I think I wouldn't undervalue it. I don't think that, I feel like we, as a community, we're not the best at project management, or planning ahead for stuff. The fact that we're only having a third PMC meeting now, ever, I think coming up, things like that. So I think that if we're going to do this event, even if it's pretty casual, identifying, who's going to work on this, having that be multiple people who have it as their responsibility specifically to make sure this event goes well, figuring out how much work does need to go into it, not making it more complex than it needs to be, because it sounds good to have it as a casual thing, but identifying this stuff, we need a help desk, we need someone to recruit help desk volunteers, we need XYZ other things set up. I'm down to do it, and I'd like to see us be more mindful about planning ahead for the event, announcing it way ahead of time. If it's going to be 3 times a year, it should basically be announced at the very end of the Backdrop Live, and start planning then. So it's going to be an all year kind of thing. If we make it something relatively chill and casual, that can be done, but as long as we have the capacity to do it. So another thing with capacity is at this point in community, so many people who are trying to do events are also are also on PMC and are also like doing development and everything. So just caution about spreading ourselves too thin. My last thing, I know I have a bunch of stuff, but system-wise, when Morgan at Palante signed up for Backdrop Live, she felt very inspired to get back on the Civi CRM thing for actually getting Civi set up for a Backdrop community. Morgan has so much work on her plate right now that she's trying to get back to it. I would love to see us get that set up so that we have a bit easier registration, donation process, and a history of who has come to events and an ability to get in touch with them again, etc. So if we could somehow come together and like figure out how to support Morgan, how to get more folks on it to get Civi up and running by the next one, that would be great.
Is that a cue for me?
Well, it could be.
I have some thoughts, but go ahead. You were taking a breath in. Go ahead, Tim.
No, if you haven't really had much to say. So, did you have anything to add?
Unusual for me to hear that about myself. Yeah, I have some notes. So I just want to name that, I have a very specific kind of niche and relationship with Jen and Nate and Backdrop and Jack and Tim. You're newer in my world. And Savarsi and Jason are also new in my world. But mine, so here's who I am to Backdrop. I think I was there kind of at the beginning, and I've ended up kind of having kind of a global ambassador role with Civi. And it became really clear to me that as soon as, the Civi and Backdrop were in the same sentence, that I wanted to kind of just be involved in that particular little sandbox. And so I play in it in and out. And I think it's valuable. I mean, you guys can say yay or nay, but it has felt valuable during this, what I think of as Drop being kind of in its early days of evolution. What is it, 6-7 years now we celebrate, which is incredible, really, when you think about so many things disappear within a lot less time. So some of the specifics, I think, I love what you said, Jen, about the meaning and the reasoning behind 3 years, about 3 times a year. I think it's just critical to just name it. I think it's at a point, Drop's at a point, the product is at a point, and the community is at a point where it's still very much in growth in my mind. And I think giving several opportunities for all the reasons that were mentioned, I think is good. Yeah, saving the date and planning ahead, that's something that's took me a long time to learn in all sorts of communities that I've hosted and designed events, but I think that's a must, and hopefully it doesn't seem too difficult to you. So there's some things that I've introduced this year with other events that I do, can I shift into like a bit of a prescriptive mode for a moment? Yeah. I was just looking at Jen nod, so I feel I have that permission. So one of the things that I've introduced in some virtual events that I'm doing, mostly with the Co-Housing Association and with the Foundation for Intentional Community, is that during our conferences, and we do 2 a week, I mean, there's a lot of virtual stuff going on with both orgs. But one of the things that was really a big hit this year with the Co-Housing Conference, and this is 150 to 350 attendees, a full day, is that we have exhibitor rooms. So we have an extra opportunity for regular attendees, either co-housing residents or co-housing curious, to go and meet with some of the professionals that support the movement. So I don't know, that seemed to be, and it has a particular slot on the calendar, but it gives something a little lighter than the educational content or than everything else that's going on. The other thing that I have started to get clear in my own mind is that with the Foundation for Intentional Community, we have 3 different types of events now. And I know I'm preaching to people who already have heard this many a time, but I just wanted to create the distinctions. We have what clearly now we've defined over the last few months as a panel event where several people sit sharing their experience about a particular thing. We also have a workshop, which is really something that's more delivered at people with some interaction with the audience. And also we have a webinar that really is just a 1.0 talking at people. But I found that we were able to attract 22 to 25% more people by making clearer the types of activities that we have. So some variety. And of course, I feel like I'm taking up a lot of space. So what else can I say? I'm curious about how I think you all might be maybe the only community where I'm aware of a care and some love about the rest of the world. With Civi, we have, Australasia on a separate calendar. We have Europe, even though the US does try and cater to Europe. But how did that work? I mean, does that attract more people? What's the ROI with management of all that? I know Backdrop has people all sorts and on all sorts of places, but I'm just curious about how rolling all that into one has worked out.
I'd like to answer that, if that's okay, Tim.
Yeah.
So I think it came from necessity. Like when we first started as a community, there weren't enough people in any one location to make an event work. And so we started from the very beginning saying we have to involve everybody worldwide. And I think that as the community has grown, we've now gotten to the point where like we can have local meetups and there are enough people to meet in any one given location. But just because we started in a place where we had to involve the whole world, I think that sort of changed our outlook on how we're going to do everything going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good, thank you. I had a hunch, but yeah, it's good to hear you.
Neil, can you mentioned 3 kinds of events that you do: panel events, workshops, and I missed the third one.
A webinar.
Webinars, okay.
And webinars, like audience doesn't get a chance to interact. Workshop, basically with Zoom tech and other techs, everybody is part of the conversation, but really there's, Jack's presenting on something and we all get to kind of engage in their conversation, in that topic. And then a panel, obviously is super rich and fun, can be. I mean, with Civi, we're doing a CMS series now, where Drupal and Backdrop and WordPress will be in the ring. And then I really wanted also to have Joomla and Backdrop to be on the same event, but that was pushed back on for lack of time. But anyway, that was just a similar kind of thing where we actually get folks from different communities to speak about their experiences with the product. I saw your faces, Jack. Not sure what those meant, but we can get to that in a minute.
So I in response to some of the things said recently, I would like to add on the international or the global reach thing. I think part of your question is sort of how did it come about, but also how effective are we or how is it working? And I mean, I think we're having some success there. I still feel like we struggle a little bit, certainly in terms of Backdrop Live. I mean, I'm pleased with the progress we've made there, but certainly the US hours are more active and easier to sort of keep going. And we have had at least one person point out that from their time zone and perspective, there just weren't the same opportunities. And I think that can get better over time. And I think we just have to keep working on it. I don't think it's been a failure yet, that we would want to quit doing it, but we certainly need to acknowledge that like it would be an area I would put some focus in for the next one.
Any really progress is fantastic,
Right. How to better reach folks in other parts of the world than really the US time zones. So and yeah, I want to reiterate that I do think that if we're going to do this on a frequent basis, that maybe it should become part of the outreach meeting agendas, because to keep the discussion going. I've sometimes felt like it's not that we've been afraid to bring it up during the outreach meeting, but sometimes I might have been overly hesitant to spend too much time in the outreach meetings because I felt like it was its own project. And that still could be the case. Maybe it's worth having a dedicated meeting, not every week but every few weeks or something on the outreach. I'd love, or on the Backdrop Live, just to focus on the logistics of that. If there's a core group of people, I don't like to add more meetings if it's the same people going to more meetings. I like to add more meetings if it's bringing new people in that might not otherwise participate. So that would be the criteria in terms of having another meeting is, will we get new people to come to those meetings instead of the same old people? We're running out of time. The dev meeting starts in a few minutes. I also want to follow up on the Civi CRM thing, because this prior to Backdrop Live, we've been for the last year talking about using Civi CRM to better manage our volunteers and our lists, and that keeps getting stalled. In addition to Jack and Morgan bringing this up, Laren also very specifically said, let me try and make some time to help with that. So we've had several people volunteer to do that, and we just need to figure out a way to project manage it and make sure it happens. Go ahead, Jack.
Oh, so quickly on a few points. Neil, my faces were mostly that people didn't want to have Backdrop, but there's still not a full release of Civi CRM for Drupal 8 or 9, is there? So that's funny that Backdrop is ready. But so those are my faces. I think incorporating Backdrop Live into like the agenda for outreach meetings ongoing seems like a really good idea. Feels like outreach and community meetings is really what we're having, and I think giving more people the opportunity to get involved, giving us a regular space to say like, hey, we need this done, will really help this. For the Civi CRM for Backdrop community, I'm looking at this ticket. I mean, like, Morgan actually started like a year ago, like setting up the site, like setting up a test site and everything. So like an installation started and then got stalled on Palante's end. I'd love to, I know the Civi team at Palante is really slammed, but I could try to help facilitate like figuring out, all right, what's been done? Is that useful at this point or not? Do we need to start from scratch? And then if once we figure out the status, like then kind of PM folks to do the different parts of the work. Like if Laren's interested, if Morgan can do some, I'd be down to like kind of take on PM for that, if that seems helpful to like keep the momentum going.
Okay. I think it might. Let's talk more about that later. I had a really important thought that just disappeared. So, yeah, we're almost out of time. Is there anything else? Sarvashri, some of the things you were bringing up earlier, we'll have to come back to. Let's quickly acknowledge, this is what the thing on the Civi CRM is. What we at least need to do, because this is kind of an urgent decision from my perspective, is like, Laren brought up like adding Civi CRM to the event site. To manage registrations, right? And I think he was just thinking about registrations, but we're also talking about Civi CRM to manage our overall. And so what I'd like is some, at least fairly soon, some guidance on how to manage all of our Civi CRM needs in a smart way so that we don't start, we don't suddenly have 3 different Civi CRM installations. So, Sarvashri, you had a meeting about, you have been persistently reminding us of the value of videos, and we had a session at Backdrop Live, and we need to come back and talk more about that. Do you, in just a couple sentences, have any update from Backdrop Live on what the next steps are?
Well, yeah, I had mentioned 12 potential videos that we could start on. I think one thing that would be useful is we could have some training on how to do good videos. Whoever's good at that, get them to train other people so that everybody feels like they can do a good job if they're asked to. That would be useful.
Would that be a suitable topic for a virtual user group to talk about this, doing screen, not just your initiative, but doing screencasts, the tools to do screencasts? Or is that something separate from the virtual user group?
It would probably work for a lot of things, but it would certainly work for my proposal.
Yeah. I mean, doing a training at a virtual user group. So having a virtual user group where the topic is, tools and how to do a screencast. So,
yeah, I think that would be highly useful. I think you would get a lot of participation in something like that too.
Okay. So let's keep talking about that and anything else. Okay. Anything else for today? I feel like there was one other logistical thing. Well, Okay, we got plenty of time. We'll come back to these things later. So, okay, so thanks for all the feedback on Backdrop Live. It sounds like we're going to go ahead and proceed. It sounds, I'm not hearing anyone, even I think the folks who mentioned that that wasn't a great time slot acknowledge that at this stage, you know, maybe, so we might, it was brought up in Europe that a lot of, you know, mid-July in particular, even more so in Europe than in the US, is a lot of people are away and not focused. So it might be, our European group really stressed that they wanted to be more involved in helping make that part of the calendar work better. But I think they were concerned that this is like the worst time of the year for them to do that. So as long as we keep that in mind, I think we can maybe go ahead with that time slot, recognizing that it might be that our big European push comes later at the next one after that. Okay. Let's wrap up this meeting and get ready for the dev meeting. Bye, everyone.
Hey, Jack, this is for you.